One thing I will not do is kiss your ass.
Oh no, you're not gonna deny me. As much as it hurts me personally.
For decades, Vince McMahon wasn't just the CEO of WWE, he was the kingmaker, the puppeteer, and the man whose vision transformed professional wrestling into a global empire. But behind the bright lights, scripted promos, and sold-out arenas, McMahon carried something else with him: grudges. Known for his iron will and ruthless business style, Vince didn't just dislike certain wrestlers, he flat-out hated them. And when Vince McMahon hated you, it often meant your career in WWE would never be the same. Throughout his reign, McMahon clashed with legends, fan favorites, and even top-drawing superstars. Some feuds came from money disputes, others from bruised egos, and some from simple acts of defiance. While many fans saw Vince as the ultimate promoter who always kept business first, those who worked closest to him knew there was another side. A man who took betrayal personally and rarely forgave those who crossed him. The wrestlers on Vince McMahon's most hated list weren't just names on a roster. They were athletes who shaped wrestling history, and their conflicts with Vince left scars that changed the industry forever. From shocking walkouts to infamous screw jobs, Vince's hatred didn't just create drama behind the curtain. It spilled into storylines, matches, and even the legacy of WWE itself. So, who were these wrestlers that Vince McMahon personally despised the most? And what exactly happened to earn his unforgiving wrath? The answers may surprise you, and they reveal a side of Vince McMahon that fans rarely get to see. When wrestling fans talk about Vince McMahon's deepest grudges, one name always rises to the top: Bret the Hitman Hart. For years, Hart was Vince's golden boy, the face of WWE during the turbulent mid-1990s. He carried the company on his back when business was shaky, delivering classic matches night after night. But by 1997, tensions between Bret and Vince had reached a boiling point, and what followed would become the most infamous moment in professional wrestling history: the Montreal Screwjob. The story begins with Bret Hart's decision to leave WWE for rival promotion WCW. For Vince McMahon, this was more than a business move. It was a personal betrayal. Vince had invested heavily in Bret, making him the centerpiece of WWE programming. Now, as Bret prepared to jump ship, Vince faced a nightmare scenario. His world champion might walk into WCW with the WWE title belt. To McMahon, that was unacceptable. The last thing he wanted was to see his company's top prize paraded on his competitor's television show. The situation came to a head at Survivor Series 1997 in Montreal, Canada. Bret was scheduled to defend his championship against Shawn Michaels, a man he famously disliked. Behind the scenes, Bret had made it clear he would not lose to Michaels in Canada. Vince initially agreed, but secretly he began plotting a different outcome. What happened that night would shock fans around the world. During the match, Michaels applied Bret's signature move, the sharpshooter. Without Bret's consent, Vince ordered the referee to ring the bell, declaring Michaels the winner and crowning him the new champion. Bret Hart had been double-crossed on live television. The aftermath was explosive. Bret spit in Vince's face, punched him backstage, and left WWE in fury. For years, Bret described Vince as a liar and a backstabber, while Vince defended his actions as a necessary business decision. Yet beneath the surface, the hatred was clear. Vince McMahon couldn't forgive Bret for walking out, and Bret could never forgive Vince for humiliating him in front of millions of fans. This single incident defined both men's legacies. For Vince, the Montreal Screwjob solidified his role as the ruthless promoter who would do whatever it took to protect WWE. For Bret, it became the darkest chapter of his career, a wound that took decades to heal. Even when they eventually reconciled years later, the scars remained visible. Fans still debate who was right and who was wrong, but one thing is certain: Vince McMahon's hatred for Bret Hart ran deep and shaped the direction of WWE in the years that followed. The Montreal Screwjob wasn't just a wrestling storyline, it was real life. Betrayal broadcast to the world, and it proved that when it came to protecting his empire, Vince McMahon's grudges could become legendary. If Bret Hart's betrayal hurt Vince McMahon emotionally, then the Ultimate Warrior tested his patience like no other. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Warrior was one of the most electrifying stars in wrestling. With his neon face paint, wild energy, and explosive entrances, he captured the hearts of millions of fans almost overnight. For Vince, Warrior seemed like the perfect successor to Hulk Hogan, someone who could carry WWE into a new era of superstardom. But what looked like a dream partnership quickly turned into one of the most toxic relationships Vince ever had with a wrestler. The first major clash came in 1991. At the height of his popularity, Warrior decided to demand more money. Before his big match at SummerSlam, he delivered Vince a letter threatening to no-show unless he was given a huge raise and guaranteed payout. For Vince McMahon, this was nothing short of extortion. He reluctantly gave in at the time to save the show, but after the event, he suspended Warrior immediately. It was the first clear sign that Vince didn't just dislike Warrior, he hated his arrogance and unprofessional behavior. Warrior's returns in the years that followed only deepened Vince's frustration. Each time, he came back with fanfare, only to clash with McMahon again over money, scheduling, or creative direction. Unlike other wrestlers who understood that Vince's word was final, Warrior constantly pushed back, acting as though he was bigger than the company itself. For a promoter like Vince, who demanded loyalty and control, this was the ultimate insult. The tension wasn't just backstage, it bled into how Vince spoke about Warrior publicly. In 2005, WWE even released a DVD titled The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, portraying him as erratic, selfish, and impossible to work with. Few wrestlers in WWE history had ever been buried so thoroughly by the company. It was clear that Vince McMahon wasn't just critical of Warrior, he genuinely despised him, and yet, in a twist of fate, the two men did reconcile, at least on the surface. In 2014, Warrior was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, standing on stage beside Vince once more. Many believe this was a symbolic peace offering, a chance to bury decades of bitterness. But just days later, Warrior suddenly passed away, leaving fans stunned. While Vince publicly mourned him, many still wondered if the old wounds ever truly healed. The Ultimate Warrior remains one of Vince McMahon's most complicated relationships. He was a superstar who had everything Vince wanted in a performer: charisma, star power, and fan appeal. But behind the scenes, he was the embodiment of everything Vince hated in an employee. Warrior refused to play by Vince's rules, and Vince never forgave him for it. Theirs was not just a feud between a boss and his worker. It was a battle of egos, of control, and of two men who both believed they were untouchable. And in Vince McMahon's world, no one could ever be bigger than the company, not even the Ultimate Warrior. If there was one wrestler who defined the rise of WWE in the 1980s, it was Hulk Hogan. To millions of fans, Hogan was the ultimate hero, the man who told kids to say their prayers and eat their vitamins, and the face Vince McMahon used to transform professional wrestling into a global phenomenon. Together, Hogan and Vince built an empire. WrestleMania, pay-per-view extravaganzas, merchandising empires, all of it was powered by Hogan's star appeal. But behind the scenes, the relationship between Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan was far from perfect. At times, it was filled with resentment, betrayal, and personal dislike. Hogan was Vince's most valuable asset, but he was also his biggest headache. As Hogan's fame grew, so did his ego. He began demanding special privileges, creative control, and top billing no matter the opponent. Vince, who always prided himself on being the ultimate authority, found himself locked in constant battles with the very man he made into a superstar. While Vince valued Hogan's drawing power, he hated how much influence Hogan tried to wield over the company. The cracks widened in the early 1990s. Hogan's mainstream popularity was fading, and Vince was desperate to push new stars like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and the Ultimate Warrior, but Hogan refused to step aside gracefully. He often used his backstage pull to protect his own image, refusing to lose cleanly to rising talent. For Vince, this was a betrayal of the company's future. Then came the scandals. The steroid trial of the early 90s placed Vince McMahon under enormous pressure, and Hogan was dragged into the spotlight as well. Though Hogan testified in a way that spared Vince from harsher consequences, many within WWE believed their relationship never fully recovered. Vince was a man who valued loyalty above all else, and while Hogan helped protect him in court, Vince never forgot that Hogan's personal controversies had put the entire company in jeopardy in the first place. The final straw came when Hogan left WWE for WCW in 1994. To Vince, this was the ultimate insult. The man he had built into an icon was now giving his star power to WWE's biggest rival. Hogan didn't just join WCW. He helped lead it to victory during the infamous Monday Night Wars. Vince McMahon may have been a shrewd businessman, but on a personal level, watching Hogan elevate his competition was a wound that cut deep. When Hogan eventually returned to WWE years later, the relationship with Vince was repaired enough for business, but the animosity never fully disappeared. Vince could smile on camera, celebrate Hogan's returns, and induct him into the Hall of Fame, but privately, there was always tension. Vince hated that Hogan had once been bigger than WWE itself, and he hated even more that Hogan had proven he could thrive without him. Hulk. Hogan may have been the face of Vince's empire, but behind the curtain, their relationship was filled with distrust and bitterness. It was a reminder that in Vince McMahon's world, no star was ever bigger than the machine, and if you tried to be, you'd earn a place on his list of personal hatreds. While Vince McMahon's grudges with legends like Bret Hart, the Ultimate Warrior, and Hulk Hogan have become infamous, his frustrations didn't stop in the past. Even in the modern era, Vince developed strong personal dislikes toward certain wrestlers, especially those who refused to bend to his authority or treated WWE as just another paycheck. Among them, Brock Lesnar stands out as one of the most polarizing figures in Vince's eyes. On the surface, Vince respected Lesnar's talent and drawing power. Few wrestlers in history have matched Lesnar's intensity, believability, and ability to sell tickets. He was a once-in-a-generation athlete, and Vince knew it. But behind closed doors, Lesnar represented everything Vince disliked in a superstar: unpredictability, lack of loyalty, and an unwillingness to live by WWE's rules. Lesnar infamously walked out of WWE in 2004 at the peak of his career, choosing to pursue other ventures like football and mixed martial arts. To Vince, this was more than a business decision. It was a personal slight. He had invested millions into building Lesnar as the company's next big star, only for him to abandon the WWE spotlight when Vince needed him most. Although Lesnar eventually returned in 2012, the scars from his early departure never fully healed. Vince gave him lucrative contracts and top billing, but insiders often described their relationship as tense. Vince hated that he had to bend his own rules to keep Lesnar happy, and Brock wasn't the only one. Wrestlers like CM Punk, who openly challenged Vince's decisions and criticized WWE's creative direction, also earned Vince's personal dislike. Punk's infamous pipe bomb promo may have thrilled fans, but to Vince it was a direct shot at his authority. When Punk walked out in 2014, citing burnout and frustration, Vince reportedly saw it as another betrayal from someone he had trusted with the company's future. Even with stars he respected, Vince's grudges often lingered. Randy Savage, for instance, was kept out of WWE's Hall of Fame for years due to Vince's personal dislike, despite Savage's legendary contributions to wrestling. Countless other wrestlers, from Jesse Ventura to Jeff Jarrett, found themselves on the wrong side of Vince's wrath, often disappearing from WWE history books for long stretches until their relationships were repaired, if they ever were. What made Vince's grudges so impactful wasn't just that he disliked certain wrestlers, it was that his personal feelings often shaped WWE's direction. If Vince hated you, your career could stall overnight. Matches could be canceled, storylines rewritten, and opportunities taken away. For some, like Warrior and Bret, reconciliation eventually came. For others, the animosity never faded. In the end, Vince McMahon's list of wrestlers he personally hated tells us more about Vince himself than about the wrestlers. He was a man who demanded control and loyalty above all else. When someone defied him, embarrassed him, or threatened the power of WWE, he rarely forgot it. To Vince, business and personal grudges were often the same thing. And in his world, no one, not even the biggest superstar, was above his authority. As the years pass, fans still debate who truly belonged on Vince McMahon's most hated list. But one truth remains. Vince's grudges were as legendary as his empire. They weren't just backstage disputes, they were battles that shaped the history of professional wrestling.